IT difficulties, I'm afraid, so you'll be stuck with me for the start of the meeting. I think Vice Chair is joining us slightly later, so Adam will be able to take over if Anne is not back up and working by that point, or her IT, I should say. So welcome along this afternoon. Thank you all for your attendance. I don't know who we have apologies from. Fiona Finlay, do you have a list of apologies?
Hi, Rob. Yes, I do. So we have apologies from Councillor Glenn Reynolds, Dan Shaw, Graham Smith, Grant Moyer, Kate Bond, Matt Lochley, Pam Milliken, Rab Dixon, and Jacqueline Lynn. I just want to also note that George Howie is substituting for Pam Milliken and Jenny Anderson is substituting for Rab Dixon.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I see you've noted in the chat just around recording and publishing of this meeting. So any members who have any concerns around that, please let us know. In terms of the agenda, we have declaration of interests. Does anybody have any interest that they wish to declare? And we also have the equality duty. I won't go through it and read it. Obviously, in terms of equality, we wish to eliminate discrimination, harassment, victimisation, advance equality of opportunity, and foster good relations, which I'm sure we are all signed up to. But any concerns, please raise your hands. Adam, welcome. I was just starting the meeting in your absence, and Anne is having some technical difficulties. So are you content that I hand over to you at this point? I've just done we're just up to the minute. Thank you.
Of course, thanks, Rob, and apologies everyone, I was late. I just had to attend one of the team meetings to brief them on something, so apologies I was late. So Anne's not quite present though. I can see her sticker, but she's not. No, okay, so right, sorry. Typically my agenda's just Rob, just start the next bit. Sorry, my papers.
No, not at all, Adam. That's fine.
Do apologise.
Just moving on to the minutes. So we've got the minute from the last meeting within the papers. Is everyone content that that is an accurate record of the last meeting? If you could cast your minds back. I will take silence as happiness on that, which takes us down to the action sheet. Adam, have you got your
perfect? I'm there now.
Up and ready?
I'm there.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm there, all working. So, right. So the action sheet. Now we've got the first thing on the item, the engagement guide completed. So nothing there. Nothing on the planning place yet, I think. And options report, reducing poverty to the LOIP. So is Amanda on the call? Did I see Amanda? Yeah, Amanda, I can see. So timescale required, are we getting that just imminently? Is that nearly ready? I'm at the end of page 1 of the action sheet.
Sorry, I was just reminding myself of it. We have, following on from the feedback, we have actually managed to develop the partnership group, and our next report, hopefully, which will be at communities and will be coming here, is a much more partner informed report. Okay. And partners are much more clearly evident in it. So that one I think we can say has been dealt with.
Okay, so we can move that to dealt with. Thank you, Amanda. The next one we've got on today, update briefing, mental well-being strand, a timescale as well from Dan. I didn't see Dan on the call, did I? No. Rob, do you know about that at all by any chance?
I do have some information around the mental health and wellbeing LOIP activity, but I'll pick that up in the next item if that's okay. Adam,
okay,
part of my
course.
briefing. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. And the self-evaluation workshop. Rob, are we thoughtful on a timescale? Clear how that will work?
Can I hand over to Fiona? On that
Fiona,
one,
yeah,
please?
Fiona, hi, come on in.
Hi Adam, thank you. Afternoon everyone. Yes, I am currently trying to schedule some workshops in probably for September kind of time, post summer holiday for those. And the CPP board evaluation, I'm actually going to a meeting of the Scottish Community Planning Network on Monday, and noticed that one of the agenda items is CPP national self-evaluation. So I wanted to wait and hear what that discussion is going to come to, and then feed in our own self-evaluation into that national conversation.
Okay, brill. And the workshop on data and childcare, the next one,
That will
Fiona?
be September. Yeah,
Yeah,
September.
so same. Okay, and the
Yeah.
financial strategy revision, Rob.
Yeah, if I may, Adam, I would look to tie that into the board's self-evaluation and workshop piece,
Okay.
so the timeline will sit alongside that. I think it's important as part of that evaluation and workshop, we look at what we're doing as a board, what we're doing as an executive, what the other strands, such as community safety partnership, are doing, how we're all linked together, how place is fitting with this, and then how the finances work. So who's putting what into that partnership in terms of money, but also in terms of capacity. So I'd like to see that as one piece of work that we take forward.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And then the website, Fiona, anything more on that?
Not in the meantime.
No.
I need to have some further conversations, but it's looking like we will stick with the current arrangements in the meantime.
Okay, and then we saw this, didn't we? The Banff Macduff evaluation report. What was outstanding here? Yeah,
it's just on the completed
planning.
list.
Yeah, so we're on to completed. Right, okay, excellent. Thanks. Right, anything that we've not picked up there that anyone wanted to speak about on the action list? Everyone content to move on? Yep, okay, super. So we're now on to our verbal update. So Rob, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Yes, just an update from the executive meeting from the 17th of April. Unfortunately, I wasn't there, but I do have the update to provide today. So my thanks to Kate Bond for chairing that in my absence, and Finlay for pulling together the various pieces of work around that. So we received updates from the Health and Wellbeing LOIP at the meeting, and we focused on place, and a verbal discussion was had on the future of mental health and wellbeing piece that we touched on in the action tracker there. In terms of that mental health and wellbeing LOIP workflow, we were advised that AVA will not be looking for further funding after September of this year, and therefore will no longer be a joint LOIP lead within the mental health and wellbeing aspects. It was noted Locator Map app will become part of AVA's standard business, along with the administration of that. The executive were asked how they see the mental health and wellbeing part of the LOIP continuing after September, when AVA's funding ceases. For the officer support, a number of officers are going to have a roundtable discussion around this. I think it's really important that we look at that across partners, the mental health and wellbeing, and look at how we work together to deliver on that, albeit in a different way from that which has gone before. It was also highlighted that the CPP Mind Your Mind steering group owns and manages the Mind Your Mind campaign, so that still sits with that. We had a discussion around funding of place plans. There was an award from the executive of 27,000 for development of place plans in Formartine and K&M, Kincardine and Mearns, in the last financial year. It's noted that £22,000 of that was not spent and will be carried over to deliver on those plans and take those forward. So the main action to come out is that off-table discussion around mental health and wellbeing aspects of the LOIP and how we're going to carry that on post-September. So that's an action for us to pick up. But that was the summary of the executive meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Anne, I see you're here. Do you want me just to finish this bit off? Would that be helpful?
Yes, please, if you can hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, Anne. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Thanks. Sorry about that.
No, not at all. Rob, thanks very much. John, come on in.
Yeah, I'm just interested in the what you're saying there, Rob, around the mental health project and Ava standing back from that. Are they able to give a kind of exit lessons learned to inform things going forward? And I'm just given the third sector involvement as we go forward is important. Just curious as to why that hasn't worked out.
I don't know if they've committed to giving us a lessons learned at this point, but it would certainly be something that would be looking for them to feed into. I think they need to feed into the next stages. Let's look at what we've done, where we've been, and then let's build out from that. So I certainly want them to be around the discussions in terms of that piece of work. So yes, we will seek that. In terms of why it hasn't worked out, I don't know, if I'm entirely honest, but again, it's something we'd seek to have conversations around just so that we fully understand that before we look at the next iteration of this post-September.
Okay, thank you for that. And yeah, I would encourage them to provide that, because they're representing the whole sector, and there may be lessons for other our engagement with other organisations as well. So thanks for that.
Thanks, John. Yeah, really key point for us all. Rob, now I'm not seeing any other questions at the moment, so thanks very much for that. And I'll hand back to Anne for item 6, reducing poverty LOIP. Anne, back to you.
Thanks very much, Adam, and my apologies. There's a hitch with my computer, so apologies for that. And just before we leave that item though, Adam, I just wonder, I think it's a bit more than encouraging. I think we need an evaluation from the work that's been done by Ava. I think it's really important that we do that. And I do think we need to rescope that part of the LOIP in terms of mental health. So I do think there's a real collaboration and maybe co-designing what we do going forward, because it's an important part of the work that we all deal with in terms of that part of the well-being agenda. And I do think that it's essential we have an evaluation and we see where we are and what the demands and needs are from here on in, because I think they've probably changed. So I think a rescoping and a reset, Rob, and indeed the question if that is still a priority for us. And if in terms of the HEAL piece, and George is here, I know George has set up some workshops, but I do think again we need to be asking the questions about at what point does that get embedded and it's not continuing as part of the LOIP, if indeed, you know, the updates, etc. I know there's an awful lot of work has been done, but I do think we need to see that embedded in day-to-day business, and we need to move away from because again there's an awful lot of work goes on behind the scenes, but I think we need an update as to how we move away from that now and we embed that work in everybody's day-to-day business. So just some thoughts. So again, maybe Rob, it's a bigger piece of work than but again, we'll need to wait to get the feedback from the workshops that George has organised. But again, I hope part of those would be an outcome so that we move forward. And again, it's an opportunity for us all to reevaluate our priorities and to just check in with everybody's resource and ability to manage the agendas. I think that's becoming a bit of an issue in terms of capacity resource that we all have in taking these things forward. So just a few thoughts. Thanks. So as you say, Adam, item 6 in the agenda is the Tackling Poverty and Inequalities LOIP update report, and an awful lot of information within this report and lots of very worthy topics for consideration by the board. So I would just like to invite Amanda in to speak to this, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'm really proud to draw the board's attention to paragraph 3.2 on page 12 in the report, and that's highlighting the shortlisting of the Tackling Poverty and Inequalities Strategic Partnerships Local Voices approach in the MJ Awards under the category Innovation in Building Diversity and Inclusion. Being a finalist really does illustrate the positives of the ongoing work that the partnership is undertaking to ensure that those voices least heard are being supported to participate in service design, review, co-production and budget allocation. As noted in the report, the partnership has been focused on looking back over the last couple of months, looking at what has been achieved or progressed in the financial year 2023-24, and those projects and activities funded in the last financial year through either Fairer Aberdeenshire Fund or the Tackling Poverty and Inequalities Reserve are summarised in Appendix 2. And whilst a significant part of the budget continues to support our information and advice service, which aims to help move people out of poverty or help them not be drawn into poverty through income maximisation, reduction of debt or crisis intervention to help with immediate fuel or food poverty, there is also support for a range of organisations and services supporting young people, older people, households and those who may be marginalised because of their protected characteristics. Adding a bit more depth to the budget summaries, the annual report at Appendix 4 provides both a deep dive into the priorities in order to reduce priority, but also highlights local community planning and action across Aberdeenshire to give that sense of place-based activity. And the board itself is well versed in some of the transport challenges being faced in our rural area, and you have yourselves previously asked for a report confirming the approach to rural transport across partners, and you considered that back in March 2023. This has continued to be a concern, however, highlighted by the Local Voices Forum. And whilst we're all aware there is a lot happening in relation to rural transport and the challenges presented, it is an area with a lot of activity, and the partnership asked for an overview of work to be supplemented by the voices of those experts of experience. The report is at Appendix 3 and it's designed to complement, not duplicate other work and add to that knowledge base, and that's in the same way that we've had the recently completed Aberdeenshire Rural Transport Strategy, which was commissioned by the Aberdeenshire LAG. The recommendations arising from the research undertaken by the team and the local voices, they're not necessarily groundbreaking, absolutely admit that. However, it is clear from the research that there is a real or perceived lack of inclusion or recognition for ongoing participation for those impacted by decision-making processes around transport. The landscape of national and local strategies, policies and action plans remains cluttered and complex, and there's lots and lots of evidence of need and highlighted priorities, but very little evidence that what is being delivered is what's being asked for and is actually making a difference to people's lives through affordable, accessible, reliable transport. Many of the partners around the table have an interest in transport agenda, and the direction I'm asking from the board is how lived experience can be incorporated into the development of the strategies and the solutions to rural transport, either at that very local level or that strategic level, to demonstrate that the needs are being delivered. And I would also ask that the board make any comments on the annual report as well. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much indeed, Amanda. And Anne Aiken has made comment in the chat congratulating the team on your nomination for the award. And I think we'd all concur with that. Congratulations, and wish everyone the very, very best when it comes to the awards on the 21st of June. So it is a significant achievement just to get the nomination. So congratulations to all. Please pass that on, Amanda, to your colleagues. So anybody, any questions for Amanda in the first instance before we move to the ask around the transport decision making? John?
Yeah, I was interested in the transport paper, and I noticed on page 55 there's a link to how NHS Grampian, and I'm taking that would then link into the Health and Social Care Partnership, and I'm here on behalf of the IJB, and that kind of linking up appointments and potential public transport in a more coordinated way. I see that there's a couple of posts. There's a development officer and a project officer mentioned. So is that the kind of project they would take on, or would that need additional resource to pull something together? It just seems like a very practical thing to get into, but it's then the capacity of how that's set in motion. Any views on that?
Through yourself, Chair, is that
Yeah,
in
just
terms
come in,
of
Amanda.
is that in terms of the action plan,
It's the
John?
it's the recommendation there on page 55 of the pack. Just talks about let me see, NHS Grampian need to work with people around appointment timings, cost and availability of transport links, and those with fixed lived experience need to co-produce plans. Yeah.
So yes, there is absolutely an offer that we have within the team. We have an officer and an engagement officer, and that is potentially one of the asks, and one of the ways we can proactively and practically support is that they could be part of any of the thinking around that action plan and provide that link back into voices of experience. So happy to put that on the table as an offer.
Okay, and if you can maybe George is here for Pam today, but maybe let George know who the link is, and then, well, Adam can pick up if there's anything on the NHS other side of things. I think that just could be quite a practical thing to break into. Okay, thank you.
Just before I bring Jim in as Chief Executive, I am aware that there's an awful lot of work going on in various groups around transport, around the partnerships. And Lynn Boyd from Health and Social Care led a piece of work and did workshops on health transportation. It's also linked through Nestrans, and there's the health transport piece that links into that piece of work. Again, there are council groups, working groups, and I'm going to invite Jim in a moment. I'm sure he will touch on a lot of the work that's going on within the council. So I think everybody's, as Amanda has said, everybody's looking at it, but how do we bring it all together? Because there has work has been done and is being done on the health side of things, John, in various places. So with that, I'll ask Jim maybe to come in, please.
I'm probably not going to be able to sing for my supper. Apologies in terms of answering on that one, maybe, but I'm happy to try to busk it a little bit, Chair, if I can do. As you reflect, there is a fair amount of work going on in terms of transport, and certainly can pick up that point that colleagues who are working on any existing programmes will look at that question in terms of the alignment of provision in terms of sort of tackling poverty. I think it's a really interesting policy question for us to try to contend with about the balance in terms of provision of universal public service transport with an eye in terms of a sort of economic movement to people alongside that, the very targeted focus in terms of inequity and inequality, and quite how we'd try to reconcile those two. So I think with as an action, very happy for colleagues to pick that one up, to come look at that with Amanda and colleagues to see actually are we actively making the right policy choice, and what compromises we would have to make in order to be able to achieve that. If I may ask a couple of questions, with maybe apologies to Amanda for not having sort of flagged these, so I'm happy to just get into conversations and go. I mean, clearly the report sets out a huge amount of really good work and progress being made here. I'm interested, any reflections from the team in terms of how the landscape has continued to change around us in terms of that level of poverty and need and demand, and to maybe signpost areas where our work has had to adapt or adjust in the most areas to be able to adjust to that. And with that continued, I think with Toka question, are we achieving the best outcomes we can do in terms of our work, and are we adapting to changing circumstances? And my final question, with maybe a traditional sort of focus, I'll use income maximisation example, always thoughtful in terms of to ask whether we've got the maximum level of joint working with DWP and Social Security Scotland in hand to make sure we are maximise those opportunities. Are we content and happy that all agencies around the table are doing everything they can do to be able to get behind the joint work as well? I know, for example, Susan Webb and I have a huge amount of conversational joint work going on in terms of how NHS Grampian can be sort of an anchor institution as well. So it is that sort of tireless look to say, are we doing everything that's possible within our means? But I think is that my main question, if I could speak all of that, is about what's changing around us and are we adapting adequately to be able to keep on track with those changes in terms of our community's needs and demands? Thank you.
Amanda.
Thanks, Jim. In terms of that first one, are we adapting and changing? Yes. We're possibly not doing it swiftly enough, hence why there is that piece of work, in particular with our public health colleagues and Fiona's team around the data, because we're very aware that there is data out there that would be a much better early warning sign that a community might be starting to show those attributes of potentially inequality and poverty being deeper than we would perhaps see from the standard data that we have. So there is pieces of work going on around that hopefully will help us work with partners across the board and get in on that early intervention piece quicker. But what we are seeing is, as we've seen over the last couple of years, is that move from those traditional areas where we've known we've got the kind of poverty and inequalities into parts of Aberdeenshire that are newer territory for all of us, and also for those families who are experiencing it, it's new to them as well. And so we're building on different models. So one of the models that's been very successful in Old Meldrum, for example, is the embedding of information and advice access within the academy, and that's given us a really good reach. So that's a model that we're looking at. Where else might that potentially be positive? And of course the cash first model and being a partner with the Scottish Government over that is certainly going to change as well, and there's a real focus around that on some of those more rural areas, particularly around the Mar area, and also into parts of Kincardine and Mearns, where that is potentially a better model. The other piece we're doing where we're adapting and changing, and it is working with our housing colleagues, but recognising that whilst there's a huge amount of really good work going on with our housing colleagues, both Aberdeenshire and our registered social landlords, that there is still that challenge for those who are private sector rented or homeowners. So in particular, and for Martin, that has been a bit more of a challenge. So again, I know the area team there, working alongside a range of partners, are looking at different models to support families who are seeing changes and who wouldn't normally come across the usual spaces where we would provide support. So we are changing, we're looking at where the demand is, we're adapting, but we think by improving our data that's coming through, we can improve that. And I think you also spoke about the income maximisation and the work with colleagues. The likes of DWP and Social Security Scotland are around the table. They're part of our financial inclusion partnership. They're part of our strategic working group. So we are working closely with them to ensure that we cross over and we make sure that everybody knows which is the right door to get into to get the support they need. So I'm hoping we have that there, but more than happy if there's anything coming through some of those discussions, Jim or Susan, I can pick that up and we can make sure there's nothing missing on the ground, as it were.
Okay, Jim, did you like to come back? Nope, that's fine. Okay, thank you for that, Amanda. It's Susan, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, and a huge amount of detail in the report, and great to see so much going on. I guess three comments. One, in terms of the work that we're doing around Anchor, we've just undertaken a baseline of the activity that is happening across NHS Grampian. So Amanda, I think it would be really good to sit down with you just so you see where we think we are at against the framework that we are measured against, but also have conversations about how we can increase our activity, because I know Adam's on the call, he's the leader around this, and I know is keen to increase our contribution in a number of areas, including the employability agenda. In terms of child poverty, again, some on the call will be aware that we put ourselves forward to work with Public Health Scotland. They are offering to come out to some areas to go through child poverty action plans. So we, NHS Grampian, it was an offer to health boards, has been accepted for that. So they will work with us and go through that. So I am hoping that we'll be able to do that in a collaborative way, and just really great to have an external perspective on the action that we are taking. And then the third area around health and transport, as we mentioned at the last meeting, the chair of the Health and Transport Action Plan has come into public health, and we're currently looking at the work plan. So again, perfect timing to sit down with you, Amanda, and just go through that. Lindsay's leading on that, and clearly she's aligned to Aberdeenshire. So I think that would be a really helpful connect. I guess the question I was left with, and maybe it touches on the point that Jim raised, that there's a lot of reference to bus access, but given the complexity and given the pressures, just wondering what our approach to rural transport in terms of solutions, because clearly it'll go beyond bus. I think there was mention of car sharing, but also how we use other transport that is happening through public sector bodies, etc. So again, maybe as part of those conversations, we can pick up what we think good looks like. Thanks.
Thanks, Susan. Yeah, absolutely happy to sit down. You mentioned Lindsay. Lindsay's part of that. One of the key people around some of the data stuff as well, so that'd be really positive. And it's always great to get external reviews on the plans. We always welcome that, because that's the only way we will get these improved, and that partners will work together. So more than happy that we make sure we're supporting all of that. In terms of that specific transport piece, you're absolutely right. Buses aren't necessarily going to be the answer, and I think one of the positives from having the funding available that we have, particularly within the areas, is looking at more creative, focused solutions that work in those communities and get them perhaps to where they need to be in order to then pick up the solution that might be the bus. So I know that my colleagues in Banff and Buchan, they have got particular pilots going on. For ourselves in Buchan, we are about to do some really deep dive work with our New Pitsligo community, because that happens to be a community that's really quite poorly affected by transport. It's building on the paradigm work that George and his team did. Transport came out really strongly, but the bit that didn't come out really strongly was what exactly was required for transport. Was it to make other connections to get to Aberdeen for employment? Was it to do with socialisation? It's about drilling down and then saying, how will the community also help some of these? And you're right, some of that is looking at a kind of community Uber model, or working with the community dial-a-bus, but taking the buses at different times and at weekends. So lots of different solutions that I think absolutely need to be worked through with the communities, and how do we make it then sustainable, because somewhere along the line it has to be something that the community themselves can manage and maintain. So that really does sound great. If it's Lindsay, and I'm more than happy to connect in with her over that.
Okay, Susan, do you want to come back? No, you're okay with that? Okay, so thank you. There's some actions in there, Finlay. So Jenny, please.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Apologies that Rab Dixon, the director, isn't here today, and he would have much more probably informed comment, because he works in the various partnership groups that are involved with North East Bus Alliance and the Health and Transport Action Plan. But from hearing discussions, I think they were a little bit surprised when they saw the Rural Challenges Aberdeenshire report being prepared, because it did seem to overlap with a lot of ongoing work that we were already aware of within the local transport strategy teams and the public transport units within Aberdeenshire Council. Previous people have already spoken about the Health and Transport Action Plan work that's been taking place over a lot of years. The next version, I think, is going to our board in June. So, you know, that's been an ongoing bit of work for a lot of years. We do look at appointment times. It's not an easy fix. There is the Think service, the information service that's been set up, but a lot of the things that are difficult on the public transport side is with funding. You know, it's not that we're not aware of the requests and the, you know, the difficulties. It's the sort of constrained budgets with private operators having to be commercially viable, and them having increased staffing and petrol costs, and then local bodies ourselves having reduced funding to be able to support and enhance the services just to give everyone. But there are various other measures that, and I think they are happening. It's maybe just not the awareness that all that is already going. Certainly Next Strands, you know, are happy to help. We're getting a new People and Places grant this year, which is more the active travel side, but that will be looking to work with communities and see if it's help for access to bicycles. There's a North East Cycle Hub where we're arranging sort of uplift of bikes that people aren't wanting, and either using them to upgrade them or use the parts and then distribute them to people that are in financial difficulty. So there are various measures that get about partnership that deals with access to car share and partners in travel planning. So there are a lot of things in the plan. It's maybe just that awareness of them that's been lacking. But yeah, certainly if there's anything we can help with, and as I've seen, Rab would have probably been much more able to input in this, given his involvement over the various strands. But yeah, certainly ask if there's any further comment from him.
Okay, I was going to say, sorry, thank you, Jenny. But this has been trailed at this, and you don't always attend, so, but this has been trailed, this work was trailed at previous community planning partnership boards. So it certainly has been mentioned here before within the board that the Tackling Poverty and Inequalities partnership was taking that piece forward. So Amanda, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yes, absolutely. And if we've missed if some of it, maybe we've not potentially connected in with some of the right people. So we'll take that on board. I know we are ensuring that we're engaged in a lot of the discussions around some of the Next Trans projects, particularly around active travel, because some of this is about, actually, it's not about car, it's not about the bus, because it's maybe a less than a 5 mile journey, and actually there's a really safe off-road route that with access to good quality bike and protective equipment, that absolutely nails it for the person. So really keen that those active travel pieces aren't lost, and that those aren't parts that we are looking at. And I did see something about the funding, because I know colleagues are looking at that for, again, apologies because I work in Buchan as well, but we're really keen on active travel within Peterhead town. Because where the campus is going to be, we're very aware that we have to ensure that families who currently live in the centre of town, which is some of our more deprived areas, can get to the campus, and active travel is so key for that, and it's about how we design some of that in. So there are lots of positives where I think we've made the connections, we've maybe just not made all of them. So Jenny, happy to pick that up as well.
Thanks.
Thank you. Adam, please.
Yeah, thanks, Anne. As Jenny was just talking about uplifting bikes, as a lifelong cyclist with many bikes, I was anxious my wife might hear that in the background, you know, and ring up the line and get loads of my bikes removed. So 3 things from me. The first was about Anchor, and Susan's covered that. And just to reiterate, I am mad keen that we do much more together in the Anchor bit, and I think our employability bit's definitely quite weak, and I was swapping messages with Jim about procurement, where I think we're a little bit better, but definitely some real opportunity around anchor stuff there. So really pleased that's in. My second, I think Susan and Jenny have dealt with as well, around access to healthcare and the transport and the thing, and I guess it's just an offer. If that gets stuck at all with how you make it work, I'm happy to obviously just try and encourage people to join in if they're not, but if they're joining in, great. And I know it's very difficult, so easy to say about an integrated appointment time with transport, but I know extremely difficult to actually figure out how you make it work all the time in a system that's overpopulated. And then my third bit, Amanda, was the question that no one's dealt with yet. I'm really interested in how around all of these things we prevent sort of stigma around the poverty and stuff. And I just wondered if there's a few comments on that as to the kind of approach that we try and reduce or avoid stigma, or I'm not quite sure what the right word is, but you know what I mean.
Thanks, Adam. I think that stigma piece is such a big piece, and it's certainly become much more critical in the last couple of years with the cost of living, where we're seeing families experiencing poverty and inequalities who perhaps in the past would never have, and they would never have come near the likes of the local authority to look for council tax reduction or access to funds, and it's partly because of that stigma piece. So a lot of work going on around that. That's part of the reason we wanted to be part of the Cash First partnership approach, because we really do see that moving to that approach really does take away a chunk of the stigma. But one of the things that we picked up with some of the work with young people was almost they will be one of the ways to help support the removal of stigma. So there is a youth group around tackling poverty and inequalities who are helping to engage and consult with us on some of the messaging and how you reduce it and what are the different things you can do. And they're very keen that it's a stigma piece that they wish to tackle, and they very much see working the partnership, making sure they're working closely with colleagues in education and within our school setting is quite a key part of that. And hence that was a little bit about why embedding information and advice within an education setting was quite important, because they're doing it from a different way, they're doing it from a different model, and that seems to be helping and allowing for the young people to go back and talk to families about different things that are there, but they're using different words and different mechanisms. So it remains a really big issue, but we're tackling it slowly.
Would you like to come back, Adam? No, you're okay. Any other contributions at this point? No, I think the conversation absolutely demonstrates the complexity of all of this and highlights the number of groups that are working on transport issues. We've heard from Nestrans. We know that there are a number of working groups and transformational pieces going on around the council. So I think it would be helpful if certainly in the first instance, all of you as partners can go back into your own organisations and just have a look and see what is being taken forward and what is being discussed, and see if we can actually avoid duplication and bring some of these pieces of work together, and look at the issues that Jim raised at the very start, really around that policy and strategic direction that we require to be able to maximise the opportunities for access to services through public transport where budgets allow. I think that's the key thing as well. But Amanda, certainly in terms of the transportation, there's a lot to discuss, I think, but we need to try and bring all the work strands together, because again, I think everybody's given an example of where there's work going on, and we just need to bring that together. So I don't know if our partners around the table can ensure that you can pull in to perhaps the executive, Rob, all the different strands and have a look at how we can potentially avoid duplication, but bring things together in a more strategic and collaborative way. And I think, Amanda, we've got this report coming to a council committee this week. So again, there's an opportunity within the council to be able to try and direct some of that work as well. Okay, so those are some actions there, Finlay, for information to come back to the executive. Now, Amanda, you had the ask in the very first instance to look at the question of transportation. Are you content that we've given some direction as to how we would deal with this going forward? Or do you require something else?
Nope, I don't require anything else. That's been really helpful, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. So with that, we just look at the recommendations, which are on page 12. Do we agree those recommendations, please? Those are agreed. Okay, thank you very much. So the next item, and again, just to reiterate, Amanda, our best wishes for the awards on the 21st of June, and certainly very well deserved, and hope you're successful. So item 7 then on our agenda is place policy and strategy. It's a draft paper. We're being asked to consider, comment and endorse. To note that the place policy and strategy is going to area committees during May, and that there'll be a report to full council at the end of June. So Paul, would you like to introduce this, please?
Thanks, Chair. I think it's only fair that I pass the baton on to Fiona, however, who's drafted the strategy and the policy, and has been working with area managers to ensure that we report to committee timeously. I could take credit for all the work, but I have to admit Fiona's done a grand job of pulling this policy and strategy together and getting it round the areas. Sorry, Fiona, to throw you in at the deep end.
I'm sure she was expecting it, Paul. Fiona, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Paul. So as Paul said, this report is asking the board to provide comments on and endorse the draft police policy and strategy. And comments will be considered and reflected in the report that's going to full council on the 27th of June. They have been considered by Aberdeenshire's area committees over the last few weeks or so. And those comments are also going to be collated for the report to full council in June, and I'll reflect on some of those comments when I get to the end of my presentation. So these documents have been developed by a cross-service working group, including representatives from planning and economic development, area managers and policy development officers. They're a key driver to change, clearly underpinned by a strategic place-based framework that will develop and enhance how data is used to inform local activity and how we engage and work with our communities. It's not about new teams being formed or necessarily recruiting additional people. It's about refocusing and emphasising the work that we already deliver at a local level, but with a greater focus on data and a much stronger emphasis on the importance of the community voice to shape local needs and action. The approach recognises the challenges, and more importantly, the opportunities facing the council and all our partners, and looks to build on current successes, and deliberately supports partnership working to deliver the evidence-based place and well-being outcomes across our communities, recognising these outcomes as the starting point for all Aberdeenshire communities. The place policy is a council document providing clear direction to council officers of the requirement to work in a fundamentally different way, looking at all council activity through a place lens, ensuring that we're joining up and collaborating on activities that will achieve the best outcomes for our places. The place strategy provides a greater level of detail on how the activity will be delivered, and a toolkit is being developed to ensure that there's a level of consistency in approach whilst allowing for local differences. Once the documents are agreed, teams will be working alongside partners to deliver place plans, 17 place plans based on our academy towns, and the place plans will be underpinned by the place and wellbeing outcomes as a common framework. The holistic nature of the framework will require all 13 outcomes to be considered within each place plan, with that consideration informed and supported by qualitative data as well as quantitative and the voices and perspectives of communities. While the production of place plans will focus on academy towns, this will not be to the detriment of our smaller communities and settlement. It's recognised that for many of these services, for the smaller communities will already be located within larger towns, such as the academies themselves, and issues like accessibility and availability of services for smaller communities is something that will be considered as part of the place agenda. Communities will also have the opportunity to develop their own community action plans or local place plans depending on their needs and aspirations, and support is already being provided by area and planning teams in the council to communities and groups who wish to progress these. Place plans will be owned by council place directors, with area managers and heads of service co-sponsoring activity, supported by local teams as indicated in the report. This approach will ensure strong leadership across the most senior levels of the council. Place teams will support activity with representatives from all services, along with community representatives, partner and community organisations, delivering a joined-up approach to the delivery of services and an approach to our assets. The place team for each place will reflect the different needs and requirements of that place, supported and informed by local data. Whilst the data may lead to different actions and requirements and priorities being identified for each place, the approach to identify those elements will be consistent and will be data-led, based on the place and wellbeing framework and informed decision-making. Place plans will be owned by the Community Planning Partnership and endorsed by area committees. To support this, the role of local community planning groups will be strengthened with revised terms of reference, role, purpose and governance, and a paper will be brought to board in September setting out proposals around reviewed governance arrangements. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, the draft policy and strategy have now been considered by all area committees and comments are being collated for the meeting of full council. I'll be happy to circulate those comments and feedback. In the meantime, some points of feedback to highlight to the board specifically were around asks around partner buy-in to the approach, and also whether partners can consider the impact of their policies and budget on place and well-being to support the place approach. Thank you, Chair, and happy to take questions and receive comments on the papers.
Thank you very much indeed, Fiona, and thank you for the work that's gone into bringing us to this point. So there is a question posed there in terms of all of our positions as partners for the Community Planning Partnership Board. So anyone, any questions or comments, please? John, please, and then Jim. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I was waiting to possibly come in later. So, but just on that bit about partner buy-in, I think that is really important, and it's the way in which that's done. So it's not a tick box. We'll adhere to this. If this is going to make a difference, there needs to be something where the partners own this. And I understand it's kind of council focused and bringing the resource around it, which is really important. But there's something significant here. I think this could really help with the kind of sea change we've been talking about in terms of systems. But we do need to reflect on how we take this on. So if I speak for IJB interests, then I would see us seeking a formal IJB endorsement of being part of this and asking our chief officer to indicate how we dovetail with the 17 and other areas, etc. And perhaps being on this board would welcome that all the partners do that. And with a different hat on, and it's good that Susan and Adam are here, but you know, the NHS are looking at new approaches for putting people first, which aligns with community engagement, etc. And rather than that sitting outside of this, if this is how we're going to do it in Aberdeenshire, it needs to be knitted into that, or it's actively embedded within it rather than something that sits alongside it. So that's just some initial comments on it, because I would really think this could be part of a sea change in what we need to do, and in terms of making best use of all the resources we have. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and happy to bring you back in later if you want to come back in. Jim, please.
So I think it's just wanted to come in with a couple of points, really building on what John had said. I mean, with a number of different hats on here. I think from a council point of view, this is a profoundly important piece of work, which I think in an unapologetic way we're going to get our heads down a bush on and make happen, but not in isolation. As John said, I think I look back at the past 9 years here in Aberdeenshire and think about all of the grappling we have done, trying to get the right approach to place and to look about how we align our work. And I can think of a number of different approaches we've tried before which haven't landed and haven't worked, and I think this is the most credible and viable we have. There's been a huge amount of work done to be able to achieve this, and I think as John reflected, we can see this is about how we, I'll put it in a coarse way, complete a sort of a paper-based plan together, and it's more than that. It's about how we think, how we talk together, and how we work serving the same communities. So I do think there's a number of layers, again, as John has reflected there, in terms of can we produce a single plan in some shape or form, and or could, for example, I don't know, the Fire and Rescue Service have a plan which is mandated by its institution nationally, but also contribute the right component parts of it into the place plans here as well. Important as well as that documentation piece about what we do on the ground as well. So I do think a number of layers clearly about what the council does, what partnerships do, and what our communities want to have to do in aspiration as well. I think the pilots are shown in terms of how strong an opportunity there is. So I think about the work in Inverurie, which has really helped reset and realign partners from both public services and from community to have a common ambition and agenda, which I think is allowing better progress to be made in terms of what's been achieved as well. So I'm really pleased to see this work coming in front of us here. Very keen to work with partners on a very practical basis in terms of how we can make it work and happen as well. And I hope this is going to be the version of a campaigns and approaches that works, and not one that we have to look for version 4 on in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. Susan, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, and echo a lot of what Jim has said. Really welcome this approach. I guess we've probably still got a little bit more work. I think John passed the challenge into how can NHS Grampian as an institution connect into this, and I think taking time and just working through that would be incredibly helpful. I wonder though, maybe after, if the recommendations are endorsed, whether on page 107, where we've got the place planning framework, we explicitly make that connect to other partners' strategic plans. So sending that signal that community planning is at the centre, but actually within NHS Grampian's plan, we recognise place-based planning and our commitment to it. Engagement, I think, John, you touched on that, putting people first. It's absolutely is looking at how we build that up from community planning and the structures that aren't in place in terms of that ongoing relationship with our communities. So I don't think we've got it in place, but absolutely that intent and direction I think would reflect what is in the policy here. And I guess the final bit I wondered is, there will be some risks, won't there, where agencies plan beyond the area that is Aberdeenshire, but actually being clear of what those risks might be, i.e. in our anchor institution, if our places don't align or our premises don't align with our places, how do we manage the potential risk around that? And so we're doing that explicitly as part of a commitment to this policy. But yeah, really committed to this way and approach.
Thank you very much indeed, Susan, and that really reflects that we had a workshop some time ago to introduce the place strategy, and that was committed to by all partners at a subsequent community planning partnership board. So I just wonder if we could reaffirm that, and indeed if there are any partners that are not sure or not necessarily signed are going to, think they can sign up to this, if they could indicate, that would be really helpful. Paul, I'm not sure if you'd want to come back based on what you've heard at the moment.
Thanks, Chair. I think listening to the presentation from Fiona and the collective comments and endorsements around the table, I think that there's still a lot of work to do, but I think the importance of establishing the strategy and the policy is clear. It provides us with a framework, but also a platform to move forward in a much more collaborative way with our partners. In terms of how we use, for example, how we address some of the challenges around our estate, how we look at how we operate, how we look at how we create economies of scale and the level of support and the provision of essential services and facilities to our communities. I'm not going to say it's going to be an easy journey. Change and transformation always has some bumps in the road, but I think the importance of the CPP is being able to jump the hurdles together and share the knowledge and understanding as we move forward too. So I think we're in a good place, and we need to maintain the momentum, and part of that will be presenting this policy and strategy to our full council for approval on the 27th of June. Thank you.
And in terms, Paul, of any partners that wish to take advantage of your expertise and knowledge, is there an offer available?
Yeah, I think Lucy Stiles, who sits within the Planning Economy team, is already engaging with some of the work that's been completed by the Health and Social Care Partnership and NHS Grampian around place. So again, sharing some of the knowledge, expertise and experiences that we're having at the moment. And I think there's a few tools that we've been developing. So there's a facilities monitor, which is now online, that outlines all the essential services and facilities in each of the 179 Aberdeenshire places. That's a mapping tool, very much a data hub that's online now and is accessible not only for our communities but for our partners to access and draw down some of that information to help inform decisions that they might need to make. And in addition to that, as we move forward, we'll be creating a place-based toolkit as part of the policy and strategy, and those different place-based methodologies contained within the toolkit we'll be happy to make available to partners too. Fiona, I think from a data perspective, there's obviously a lot of the strategic assessment work that we're carrying out across Aberdeenshire, and I think that data, place-based data in relation to our places, I'd imagine would be quite important too for partners to access, as well as some of the thinking around shaping places and well-being, which is being delivered in Fraserburgh at the moment, but also some of the learning from that is being taken forward through the Improvement Service in Public Health Scotland.
Thanks very much indeed, Paul. Could you maybe send Finlay the links to the online information that is available at the minute, and then all partners can access that at their leisure, Paul, please? Just where they can find that information and any assistance that can be offered would be really helpful. Does anyone have any other comments, questions, observations? And is everyone, I'll take silence as an agreement, but is everyone happy that we are again continuing to endorse and to sign up to this approach? Adam, please.
Yeah, I didn't have anything new to add from what Susan and Jim said, just other than it is really important to NHS Grampian. You know, it's one of the 3 component parts of our strategic intent. And I would just, absolutely emphasise the bit of how we get from it's a nice idea and a good thing to say to how we actually do it really practically on the ground and do it, and maybe some sense of not being overly we can do it all everywhere spontaneously, but actually we build expertise and learning to do it. Because as Jim says, you know, we've been worrying away at this for a long time, haven't we? And it's had a few iterations, and how do we really build it to be something super special? So that it was just emphasising that, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I think there is a proposal that there were 17 place planned, but they'd be developed over 3 years. So you know, there's an opportunity for us to work collectively at this and to take it forward on that basis. So hopefully that's helpful, that we're not looking at 179 in 12 months' time. So it's been developed around academy towns. So, and that will take in some of the districts round about it as well. But Paul and Fiona and others, I will be on hand if there's any issues that you want to get back into. And I don't know, at some point in the future, if members require another workshop or some more detailed information, or, you know, we're happy to take that forward as well if you wanted to get back round the table with colleagues at any particular time. Okay. I just wonder, we've got Anne Aiken on the call, and I think Wendy might have left us now, but in terms of place directors, sorry to land you in it, Anne, but is there anything that you could that you would like to add or advise or suggest or indeed comment on what you've heard?
Thanks, Anne, for putting me right on the spot there.
Sorry.
It's okay. No, I think I'm just really encouraged by the progress you're making on this. I think there's definitely a sense of and an appetite to look at things through that place-based lens, but having that ambition and actually cracking how it works in practice and how it really adds value is I think much more of a challenge. And I recognise what Jim was saying about the fact that, you know, you've been working on this for some time. So I would just really supportive of what you've been doing, and I think it absolutely is consistent, both with the fact that we've got place directors, but actually also just that through a variety of policy areas, you see how much that place-based solutions are coming through. And I see it within my own policy area around things like adaptation, where it has to be about resilience for communities across various things and building up from that. What does the community need? So I think it feels like absolutely the right thing to do. I think it's just quite difficult to actually make it work in practice. So I just more power to your elbow in that front.
Well, thank you very much. And again, if you've got any examples of where it is working, has worked, we'd be very keen to perhaps have a look at that too.
Yeah, leave that with me. I'll see if I can.
Okay.
I'll ask around the place director network and see if there's anywhere that we think might be useful for learning. Absolutely.
Yeah, one way or another. So things, and also things that haven't worked, so that we don't stumble into that as well. But I'm sure Paul would be able to keep in touch with you on that basis, and Fiona, in fact, through the community planning networks and things. So I think that we'd all benefit maybe from some learning if there is anywhere else. So thank you very much indeed for that, Anne. One last call for any comments, or are we happy to agree the recommendations and endorse what has been put before us in terms of the approach? That's been agreed. Thank you very much indeed. We'll turn then to item 8 on our agenda, which is the housing element of the local housing strategy. I'm very pleased to welcome Ali McLeod, our interim head of housing. And Ali, just hand over to you now if you'd like to introduce your report, please. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to present the Council's draft local housing strategy for consultation alongside an update on the new housing bill with some specific asks for partners in there. So firstly, if I just can cover off the local housing strategy, you'll see in there that there are 5 priorities that have been identified, and these are the result of extensive evidence gathering that's taken place through the development of the Aberdeen City and Shire Housing Need and Demand Assessment, and engagement with elected members, and the 5 priorities are laid out in 3.4 of the report. And you will see that all 5 of these will require a partnership approach to be delivered across Aberdeenshire. So in there we've quite a bit around new supply and housing options, and clearly ourselves, housing associations, developers and house builders, landlords, homeowners, communities themselves all have a large role to play in that. The role for partners is pretty clear in terms of homelessness as well, and the benefits that dealing with that properly can have as well. So also thinking around about future plans in terms of both adapted housing and meeting particular needs, and around net zero. So clearly those are 2 aspects that cannot be delivered by the council alone, but are certainly for health and social care, NHS, the likes of Skills Development Scotland, and other providers in terms of developing the future skills in terms of net zero as well. So quite a range in there. Good to get some comment on that, if not now, but before the closure of the consultation period. So alongside that, we have an update on the housing bill, which is come in front of the Scottish Parliament recently. Covers off a number of areas in there, mostly focused around homelessness, but also some aspects in there to do with rent control, and some consideration around a new deal for tenants as well. So I think potentially of most relevance, I think, for the partnership are the asks that are coming out around homelessness. So there is a duty in there to ask and act, and that extends to public bodies. I understand these are still to be defined, but there will be an expectation that in the carrying out of our duties as public bodies, that we would ask, well, if we feel that somebody may be in an unstable housing position, may be in a position where homelessness is potentially present if it is not already. So that is something that we just will need to consider in the coming months as this legislation is firmed up. We'll see secondary guidance coming through. We'd be quite keen to work with partners to develop some referral process, something that's fairly easy for staff on the front line to use to take that one forward. So again, welcome any comments around that, but just really flagging up what our intentions are there. So yeah, happy to take any comments, Chair, from any of the partners.
Thank you very much indeed, Ali. Colleagues, do you have any comments or observations or questions? Certainly in terms of population health, public health, housing is fairly integral to providing the base for people's well-being, health and well-being. So clearly a very strong link across to public health and health. And I've got John now, please.
Yeah, indeed, what you're saying there. I think what was going through my mind as I was reading this, and then I was reflecting back to the kind of transport bit that we had in the earlier discussion. So it's not really a question, but it's a comment of what these kind of policies will look like going forward once we're embedding the place-based work. And, so I'm envisaging how these kind of policy documents will in future talk to that and be informed from that. So not a question, but also with Anne being on the call, that links not just local, council policies or health policies, etc., but it relates to Scottish Government policies, because there's something in there about what space is given for things to come up from the community when so much is, I'm going to use the word pummeled down on top of us. So it was interesting, Anne, let me be a little bit, where you can actually come back to us, because you were saying, well, all power to your elbow, get on with it. And I'm thinking, yeah, and what's going to happen here between that national and local? So some observations rather than questions. Thank you.
Ali, do you want to come back on how housing will reflect place, or place will reflect housing?
Yeah, we're quite comfortable with housing becoming quite central to place plans and development of those plans. Clearly, with the local housing strategy setting these 5 priorities on Aberdeenshire level, but there will be a local emphasis around what matters for each community, and that will vary across Aberdeenshire depending on the local demographics, local economic situation, and local priorities. So I think we can, operate within that framework and certainly be happy to contribute towards that. Appreciating there was just been a discussion around that item, so I'm not privy to that, but I think we'll have quite a critical role at a local level going forwards.
Okay, thank you. Anne, did you want to come in just now?
Well, I feel as if I should come back on John's comments, but I'll dodge around the pummeling word. But I think that I think it is always trying to find that the right space for both a bit of overall strategy and parameters being set more nationally, and also the ability for local decision making, and also for, I guess, design around what actually is important for your particular communities. Because let's face it, what you need in Aberdeenshire, it won't be completely different from other areas, but in some areas it will be different because you are different from every other area, and actually within your own area. So I think there's a place for both, and I think that for things like housing, that is around what is the particular stresses on our, what is it telling us about where the pressures are, what are the particular factors that might be unique to our area within that kind of overall parameters that we set, without us trying to get into too much the detail that's actually better for you to be doing based on your knowledge and understanding of your local communities.
Okay, John, did you want to come back?
No, that's great. I think it's just an acknowledgement that tension sits there, and so how are we going to get that and create the space and work together on it? So no, that's fine. Thank you.
To be honest, John, I think that tension always exists, and Jim will be very well aware of that kind of balance between local and national in across the board in various conversations we've had. And I think just recognizing that it's there is a good place to start, really, in terms of working through what's possible. And it'll vary depending on the issues as well, I would have thought.
Yeah.
Okay, if you don't mind, Susan, I'll take Jim in since he's been mentioned.
Name checked.
Thank you for that. Two things that I could do. Firstly, just build on the conversations that's been had. I think it's been well demonstrated that sort of balance in terms of national, local, and I sit with a smile on my face at I think the frustration of all of the work we did on the back of the Ukraine refugee resettlement work to engage with government about there being a shortage of housing capacity and provision, which bluntly fell on deaf ears. But then positively, more recently, government has recognised and reflected that there is actually a shortage and a gap in terms of housing provision with, I don't know whether to call it an emergency or crisis, we can choose the word there. So I'm interested, I think, in terms of, to Ali and maybe Anne, what the opportunity is from a national point of view in terms of alignment in terms of privatisation and or funding and resources at this scarce time to be able to help us deliver the strategy we've got set out here. And a particular second question, if I may, with the report, the strategy which is well set out, does clearly focus in terms of privatisation of need. I was just interested in terms of where and how the work as set out aligns and fits with our commitment in terms of the promise, both as a council but also as a CPP. Thank you.
Ali, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, so in responding to the housing bill, many local authorities and other housing partners have flagged up that there may not be the resources available to deliver on what's required. So there is an expectation, particularly around the homelessness and the rent control side of things, that there would need to be additional financial resource attached to that in order for those to be delivered at a local level. So there is that piece, but certainly, we're pretty active on that front in terms of trying to influence, and the housing crises in the central belt of Scotland are demanding more in terms of resource from at a national level. So we're wanting to be part of that in case, in terms of meeting our needs as well.
And you've been invited to provide evidence to a government committee. Is that the case, Ali?
Yeah, that's right. So then, in gathering evidence on the housing bill and around the housing position across the country, the Scottish Parliament will hear from a few local authorities, including Aberdeenshire, in a couple of weeks' time, so we can articulate some of these concerns that are and opportunities that we have.
So I just wonder if partners, if you've got any issues around homelessness that you have concerns about, if you've had access to the bill, maybe you could pop an email to Ali in terms of any observations or comments that you might want our housing colleagues to take into account as part of the evidence that they provide from your perspective, so that we're sort of coming at it as from a community planning partnership as well as a local housing service. Susan, please.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. And someone who spends most of their days immersed in data, I just love this report. There was some really, really helpful data that I'll feed back into our public health system. I guess a couple of points. You mentioned the housing bill and the need for pathways. Certainly in our TB service, we've had a number of really complex patients where housing has been absolutely critical. So we've got some experience of some of the opportunities and challenges of those wraparound packages. So very happy to connect Ali into our TB team. So again, it's one particular cohort, but there's been a huge amount of learning around that. So happy to make those connects. In terms of the plan, there's just a couple of things that surprised me, and it was just because I hear something different as I go out and about. So the comment about key worker and no key worker accommodation challenges, if I picked that up correctly, because again, my understanding sitting on the Health and Social Care Partnership that actually some areas in Aberdeenshire there are particular concerns around key workers, with cost of accommodation being a key challenge. So I just wanted to check that it is the same source and there's no issue. And I guess the second thing around forecasting, some of the changes in health needs are actually in conditions that are preventable. So again, would just be really good to connect regarding potentially some of our assumptions around what we can change and what we'd hope to change within that 10 to 20 year period, because that might impact on some of the housing issues that you've highlighted in your report. But thank you, really great report.
Do you want to come back, Ali?
Yeah, so yeah, really welcome those two opportunities to connect, Susan. Just, I suppose, I'm coming back on key workers. Certainly at an Aberdeenshire level, we don't see it as a significant issue, reflecting really the fairly healthy rental market and lots of supply in there, lots of pressure taken off over the last few years in comparison to where it may have been in the past. But we are aware of some localized issues, and I know we've had some conversations with some of your colleagues in particular parts of Aberdeenshire. So it's useful to get that feedback, and we can reflect that into the final draft that comes before Communities Committee in due course. So, and then, yeah, equally, we're also quite keen to tap into any opportunities there are. So to develop any bespoke solutions around key worker housing. So the Scottish Government has released an key workers and empty homes fund, and we could potentially access that if there is a local issue that's preventing you from recruiting.
Do you want to come back, Susan?
No, I again, just another connect that we can make offline, and happy to link with Pam and George on that one. So yeah, no, thank you.
We do have a joint board set up, or the services have set up a joint arrangement, Health and Social Care, Housing and Live Life Aberdeenshire. So again, the officers meet on a regular basis, Susan. So if there's anything at all, that can be fed through any of your links there. So I know that you're discussing, amongst other things, Ali, housing for folks with really complex needs and things like that. So adaptations and things like that. So there's an opportunity, Susan, there for a discussion. Okay, everyone else content with the draft plan? As Ali said, if you consider it further and have any other comments, then please just email Ali with any comments that you might have, which will be considered and fed through to committee in due course. Okay. No other observations or comments? So those recommendations were to ask to review and comment and identify how partners can fulfil their duties under the New Housing Scotland Bill. So again, that's something that partners can maybe take away, and if there are any issues that emerge from your consideration, could be taken back through the executive, Rob. So maybe there's an ask at some point in the near future for the executive members to feedback any concerns or any aspects of that bill that they would have any issues around. In addition to letting Ali know if there's anything in terms of the evidence that can be shared with the government. Okay, thank you very much indeed. And that completes our agenda for this afternoon. I'd just like to thank you all very much indeed for your attendance and your participation, and apologies again for the glitch at the start, but thank you Adam and Rob for kicking us off, and I just hope you all have a good weekend. There's snow in Glencoe, so if you're thinking of skiing, then you could take advantage, but yep, chief exec's off, so anyway, thank you all very much indeed, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks now.
You.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Goodbye.